I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This Podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Pound This Podcast. Before I get into this conversation with Emily and her breastfeeding journey and her amazing journal and everything she's got going on, I want to tell you about someone else who is amazing, and that is Sarah and her entire team with Team Fit With Me. If you're looking for a health coach, if you're looking for fat loss or somebody to help you be accountable or work through gut health issues, or learning macros in nutrition or exercise, and you've been realizing you need a coach because it's hard to do on your own, Sarah's great. She can work with anyone, anywhere. It's all virtual. You'll do check-ins every week. You'll do pictures, measurements, weigh-ins, if that's what you want and those are your goals, which to me helps keep you extremely accountable. And she'll work with you on budget. So reach out, ask some questions, get all your questions answered, and then be like, hey, this is where I'm at financially. Have that conversation with Sarah and work something out too, because she works with every individual with what is going on with them, with their own health journey. So just reach out, teamfitwithme.com, chat with Sarah and see if she is the right health coach with you. Right now, let's check in with Emily and her journey. Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This Podcast. I am Amanda Valentine. I'm very excited to have an in-person guest. This is it's been so rare to have in-person guests, which is so funny because I used to do exclusively in-person guests pre-COVID. And then imagine that, COVID changed everything. But I have sitting with me with my dog Beasley sitting on her lap, Emily Kendall. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. Thanks for being over here and dealing with all my animals.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's very nice not to have a small human touching me right now. And it's a very lovely space with the candles and the plants and the soothing color. So,
oh, thank you.
Just so everybody knows, you can imagine where Amanda is when she's doing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm in my little office room. And then usually I have the animals locked out of here, but Beasley will not have that if there's a guest over here. So he needs to, if there's barking, I'm going to try to edit it out, but just letting everyone know there's a dog in here. And then I can't think of who initially introduced us. Who was it? Oh my gosh,
that
I don't remember.
Because it's been so long.
It's been a few years.
It's been a few years.
And somebody recommended.
Was it Aaron from Me Active?
No, I think I introduced you to Aaron. You introduced
me to Aaron.
I don't remember who introduced us.
Because you introduced me to Paul.
Yeah, who's my website designer. He's made my logos.
Really?
Yeah, I don't remember who it was.
Was it Megan Springer?
Yes,
it was.
That's who it was. And so Megan in 2020, because my sciatica was so bad that I couldn't sleep and I couldn't work out and I could not figure it out, I went to Megan and she was the only person, she was like a magician that fixed my sciatica. And from going over there and having conversations, she's like, you got to meet Emily. That's how it happened.
I love that. Love that. Love Megan. What an awesome human she is, and what an awesome human you are. And
thank you.
It's all very exciting. But yes, we can talk about sciatica.
Oh God, yeah, isn't that fun? Well, that's what's so funny is when I first met you, which we've been working together we worked together for a couple years, and then you helped me put together my Pound This party.
Yes.
So anybody that came to my Pound This party in August of 2022, you probably saw Emily running everything around and having a baby,
running back home to breastfeed a baby, which you were so gracious and flexible and understanding that, I had a relatively new baby. I think Grace was 4 or 5 months old at the time. And so I had committed to trying to exclusively breastfeed her, and that we can get into all of that.
Yeah, it's funny because that's like where it takes us to this conversation of kind of like following your intuition and how like things all happen for a reason and all of that. But before I want to get into that, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but I'm going to throw it out there. I can edit it out if you don't want me to. Is like when we first met too. So I was a personal trainer. I was personally training, and you're a runner.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm going to try to run Boston for your birthday. And then you're like, oh, never mind. I'm pregnant.
Yes. This is funny. The last like good run where I felt really good was a month before my 39th birthday. We were up on a family trip, and I had my son in the jogging stroller, and we just had it was a beautiful morning. We were up in Minnesota. It was crisp and lovely. And then the next day I found out that I was pregnant. But I had at the time an IUD.
Yeah, it's just so scary.
Oh, right. Like, so I know everyone's uterus is probably like, don't worry, I'm your statistic. I got you covered. It's a 0.01% chance. And yeah, that was the last time that I had a really nice run. So Boston is put on hold. But the good news is the older I get, like the more time I have to actually qualify for it. So I guess like silver lining and like,
yeah. Well, I remember the time that you told me you're like, I'm pregnant and I have an IUD. You also had COVID.
Yes. Oh yes. That was really fun. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
So we go up on this like trip to memorialize my husband's wonderful grandparents because we didn't get to because of COVID. So it was like the first time that the whole family had gotten together to celebrate their lives. They grew up this beautiful part of Southwest Minnesota, and they had a lovely little plot of land on this lake, and so everyone got to go up there, and that's where their ashes are and everything. So we got to have this beautiful memorial service for them because we couldn't during COVID. Well, then everyone got COVID from being together. This was the summer of 2021. So my stepson, he started to not feel well, and I was like, have you just been out in the sun too much and like not sleeping very well and probably not hydrating yourself very well because you're 12, right? And so, because he can get like that. But then like he kept getting sicker, and we have to drive back from Minnesota to Cincinnati, which is a 12-hour drive. And we make it to halfway through the drive to Moline, Illinois. And, we're like basically in like a hot box of COVID in the car together. And we get there, Mark goes out to get food. And I said, okay, can you pick up a COVID test for Jake and then a pregnancy test for me? Because I had been late, and it's not.
What was his reaction to that?
He was like, oh my God. Like, and so.
You just had tell me the ages of your kids, because your kids were not that far
No,
apart.
at the time. So Emma was 5. Luke was about to turn 2. Yeah, Luke was going to be 2. Because he was born in 2019. So he was about to be 2 in 2021. And Emma was, I'm not good at math, so this is really, really like stretching my brain.
No, you're right. I'm just saying they were all very
they're young. Like they're little. And so we thought we were done. Like my son was born in July of 2021. In November of 2021, my son was born in November. He was born in July of 2019. COVID, the time vampire, has and I've got 3 kids under 7. So he was born in July of 2019. In November 2019, I had the IUD put in. So it's not like it was an old IUD or anything. So but like the next morning, because you're supposed to take the tests like in the morning. I don't know, I guess when you're the hormone is the highest in your whatever. So I took the test the next morning, and it was positive. And then I had to wait because we were an hour behind. So I called my OB, and they were like, how can this be possible? You have an IUD. I said, I don't know. And they said it could be one of 3 things. It could be a chemical pregnancy, where an egg gets fertilized but doesn't take. So your body kind of like preps itself to be pregnant, but then, you know, the egg didn't implant or whatever.
Yeah.
Or it could be atopic, which is a health concern and needs to be addressed pretty immediately. Or it could be a real pregnancy. So we had to drive home that day. I had an appointment for the next morning. They did an ultrasound. They couldn't see the embryo yet, but they could see the IUD was like exactly where it should be. It didn't tilt or didn't slip out, or, you know, it was, you know, like the nice little T up in my uterus, like
doing its job,
be,
supposedly.
Well, yeah. not doing its job. And so then I had to have this blood draw. So then later that day I test positive for COVID. So you have to wait 48 hours before you can draw blood again, because they want to see if your pregnancy hormone level has doubled or more. And if that's true, then that means that you are pregnant. So now I'm like freaking out. Okay, like I have this 48-hour waiting period, like really a 72-hour waiting period, because I had to wait 48 hours to go get more blood drawn, then wait until those results came back. And you know, and I have COVID, and then I'm like, well, we need to go get these labs drawn, and I have COVID, and they were just like, just double mask yourself, go in, get the blood drawn. It'll take 5 minutes. Like, they're going to have a mask on. We have to know, because if this isn't a atopic pregnancy, then like we have to address this as soon as we can.
Yeah.
So sure enough, my doctor called me when the results came in, and like I had gone on the computer and checked it that morning, and then she called me. She's like, you are pregnant. So, ta-da.
Well, what's so crazy is that I think this just like really like leads us into this conversation, is talking about like, I don't know, I'm such a believer of everything happens for a reason, and that, you know, you were supposed to be done having kids. That was the plan. IUD was in place. It was nothing like went awry, but yet you're still pregnant, and how that pregnancy and having that baby has like led to where you're at now, which is writing a book and knowing all these other things that you're doing that like would not exist.
Nope.
If this pregnancy wouldn't have happened with your IUD.
Nope. No. So in, you know, talking about trusting your intuition, this one, I think really, like this pregnancy really helped me kind of establish that. So my oldest was born at 29 weeks and 2 days. So 11 weeks early. So I was not ready for anything. It just happened. Spontaneous preterm labor. And it was one of those moments where you just have to hand it over to a higher power, to God, you know, like you gotta, I have no control.
Yeah.
And also in that situation, I was a first-time mom, and I didn't know, like, I just, there was so much that I didn't know and that I didn't have time to know. And like, we were in a medical situation where she was in the NICU for 2 months. And she is, you know, a healthy 7-year-old now, but you know, it was a process to get there. And looking back, like we had to rely very heavily on the wonderful team of professionals that, I mean, helped her like thrive and survive those first like really kind of scary weeks on this earth. And so I had a really hard time deciding whether or not I wanted to have more kids after her, because that was a hard experience. If you have a spontaneous preterm birth, you are at risk for having one again. And they didn't know what caused it. And maybe looking back, like that's something that I should have pressed a little bit more on, like what actually did cause this. And in many instances, they can point to something like high blood pressure, which can lead to something like preeclampsia and then HELLP syndrome, where stuff happens with your liver and it gets, you know, they have to get the baby out, right? Because something has changed in the dynamics. They have to get the baby out. In my case, they're like, well, we don't know. She just came. A full moon, I don't know. And that's her little personality too. She's like, I am here. We're going to do it my way, and we're going to do it on my time frame. And I'm like, Guess we are. So I had a really hard time because there's a 15 to 20% chance that you could have another spontaneous preterm birth. I don't know if I could have gone through that again. I don't know if I could have put another kiddo through that again. And then I had one at home. So I really hemmed and hawed on that for a long time. And then I decided that our family was not complete. And I told my husband, I said, okay, let's at least try until Christmas. And if I don't get pregnant, then like, all right. Well, of course I get pregnant. So, I had with that pregnancy, I had ultrasounds every 2 weeks. I had, this injection that was supposed to help prevent uterine contractions. And, there was some stuff, again, I was at risk for another preterm delivery. There was a period of time where I could have had gestational diabetes, and luckily I didn't. I'm like, thank God, because my son was born in July. I'm like, you do not want a pregnant Italian woman in the middle of summer, and you could tell her that she can't eat pasta like that. Like that. I mean, that everyone dodged a bullet there. But that was kind of a scare, and like, okay, like that's a factor that could happen, but luckily, didn't. And then like I was around 32 weeks pregnant. I was diagnosed with intrauterine growth restriction, which means the baby is not growing like he should. So they were like, okay, we're going to monitor this and see what's going on. So then I went to the doctor twice a week. So I'd been going every 2 weeks, and then I went twice a week from 32 weeks, and he was born a couple weeks later at 37 weeks, and he was diagnosed at birth with Down syndrome. And we did not know that, which is interesting because they looked at him every 2 weeks, and he didn't present any of the traditional markers that can be present sometimes on ultrasounds for kiddos with Down syndrome. And we had so much else going on that we didn't do the genetic testing. And so that was a big surprise. And we were back at the NICU again. And I was like, okay, well, here we are. He had to have surgery at 5 days old. He has something called an ileostomy. He has a condition called Hirschsprung's disease, where part of his colon doesn't have nerve endings. So they originally were going to go in, remove the part of his colon that didn't have nerve endings, reconnect the part that did, and off we go on our merry way. Well, he was 5 days old. He only weighed about 5 pounds, and he didn't have as much colon that had nerve endings as they had hoped. So they didn't want him, essentially like his skin breaking down, sitting in like baby stool on his butt all the time. So they created an ileostomy, which is where his small intestine is routed to his stomach, and he has an ostomy bag.
Okay.
And I remember like, oh my gosh, we're like Down syndrome. That was a big surprise and something to process. But I remember when he got out of surgery, just thinking, oh, I'm a marketing professional. I'm not a medical professional. How am I going to deal with this? And now looking back, like we've managed. You adapt. Like it's amazing what human beings are capable of doing. And I think we forget that part about ourselves sometimes. Like we are very resilient and we're very adaptable. And now I can change his ostomy bag in the dark if I need to, right? Yeah. Like it's become, it's become a part of our life. And when he was born, one of my big things was, and I had this little mantra. I was like, okay, buddy, you're going to slide right out and you're going to pop right on. Cause I wanted to breastfeed. I really struggled with my oldest, because of weight gain. They were really focused on weight gain for preterm babies and babies that don't gain a lot of weight, and babies with intrauterine growth restriction. The big thing when they get out is let's feed these babies, because their growth is so critical in those first months. So I couldn't breastfeed Emma for about a month. And then it was just like slow going to make sure that she could coordinate suck, swallow, breathe, and, had the stamina to breastfeed, because it is a a big deal. It takes a lot of effort. And so when we took her home finally after 2 months, the medical team was like, okay, well, you can only breastfeed her twice a day because we need to ensure that she's gaining weight. And I could never pump enough. I exclusively pumped with her for 11 months, and I could never produce enough to replace a feeding. And that was so soul crushing in so many ways. And I lug all these breast pumps around. I stressed myself out so much trying to do everything that I could to get my milk supply up. And looking back again, trusting my intuition, I think stress had a lot to do with.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of stress.
It's a lot of stress, right? And compound, like, it was compounded stress. And also, you know, it felt like one of the only things that I could control. Like, this is the thing that I can do for my baby when she's out of my care in the hands of the care of others in the hospital. Like, I can contribute in this way because I can't be there every minute of the day. And like, here I can make this milk. I think looking back, she was my first one. I didn't get to establish a good latch and like a good process for months. And then I wasn't allowed to nurse her a lot. And should I have pushed back on that? Probably. So when Luke was born, my mantra, I would like do my walks and just talk to him and be like, all right, you're going to slide right out. And you're going to pop right on. You're going to slide right out and you're going to pop right on. And sure enough, he did. Like, he slid out. He latched like as soon as he was born. And then they came over to tell us after they did the assessment of him, like, hey, we see some markers for Down syndrome. And, you know, we got transferred to Children's when he was 3 days old because they suspected that he had Hirschsprung's. And we get to Children's, and the neonatologist there asked me if I planned to breastfeed him. And I said, yes. And she said, don't expect much.
Oh.
And
harsh.
Yeah, right? Like, and babies with breast syndrome, babies with Down syndrome, it can be a little bit more challenging for them to breastfeed. But I wasn't gonna take her kind of dismissal. Like, I'm like, I know, like, he latched. Like, I know he can do it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna listen to you. And I'm glad that I didn't, because he breastfed very well for 10 months. And then he was done. And he was like, I'm tired of looking at your armpit. So let's move on.
Yeah.
And it was my second baby. I think, you know, my milk supply was better and I could feed him. I could nurse him more throughout the day than I could with Emma. I still could never pump enough to replace a full feeding. I don't know, maybe I'm like allergic to plastic flanges for your boobs, but I could never replace a full feeding. So I still struggled a lot. So we thought we were done. We gave away all of our stuff. With Luke, I had 4 breast pumps. I had a hospital grade Amita brand breast pump upstairs in the nursery. I had a Medela pump and style that I plugged into my minivan, and I would pump on my way to and from work.
God.
Because I would pump.
Sounds awful.
It is awful. Like, it's, yeah, I mean, it's wonderful and awful at the same time.
Yeah, it just sounds very intrusive.
Yes.
Like, to somebody who's already dealing with a lot of stress.
Yes. And so then there was a hospital grade Medela that, like, a team of moms at our office worked to get at the office, because it's the hospital grade pumps are better. And then I had a Spectra pump in our family room. So 4 breast pumps, all of these like plastic, like hundreds of plastic pump parts. And I like filled our recycling bin and closed the lid. And I gave my breast pump to a neighbor that just had a baby, the one that I owned. And then we found out I was pregnant with the IUD. So with that pregnancy, again, I was 39. I had a very interesting history of pregnancy and delivery.
Yeah.
And there are complications with having an IUD, but our doctor was really awesome about it. He sat us down and he said, look, I don't have really good data because it's not like women get pregnant with IUDs. So it's not like we do clinical trials of like
It's not like doctors in Cincinnati see it every day.
No, because it's pretty rare. So he said most of the evidence that I have is anecdotal. It's like reported over long periods of time, and it probably has a negative bias. But he said there's a higher risk of placental abruption, higher risk of preterm delivery, higher risk of infection. So it was like, and then, given my history, like every day that I could make it past 29 weeks was just like a little sigh of relief. So in that weird time when we were waiting to figure out whether or not I was pregnant, I remember having this conversation with God, and I said, look, if I am really pregnant, I am taking this baby home from the hospital the next day. Mm-hmm. And I did. So, I mean, it worked out. But one of the things about trusting my intuition going into this pregnancy, I went to the doctor every week. They're like, do you want to come every week? And I said, yes, I do. Because I want the reassurance, like this will help me. And I want the reassurance to like hear the heartbeat and get my cervix checked. And I just want that reassurance. So yes, I will come every week until I have this baby. And so it was a very different experience. And looking back, I had this expectation of, I will get to have a quote unquote normal pregnancy and birth. Like there's no such thing. Like I just want to like erase that. Like everyone's journey and story is individual and unique. And like if you think about all the tiny little miraculous things that have to happen for it to go in a way like it ironically did with my third IUD baby, like all of that has to align. It's a miracle on many levels. But I like looking back, like it was just different. It wasn't good or bad. It wasn't better than my previous two experiences. It was different. And I'm glad I got to experience, being able to leave the hospital the next day and all of that. But I guess in my head, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. But luckily I was able to exclusively breastfeed her, which was a totally different ballgame. And that had its positives and negatives. The positives were like the boobs are portable. Like we can go all kinds of places, right? Like, and I can just, she needs to be fed. Right. I whip it out. Like, let's do it. And I'm all about that. Like, yes, I'm feeding my baby. Like what? This is how humanity has survived since the dawn of time. So I'm going to get my boob out here in this restaurant. Simmer down. Right.
Yeah.
And I know not everybody is comfortable doing that, but I'm like, I feel like maybe like if I can do my small part to normalize, like I'm not afraid to do it. So I want to help make that a normalized thing, like breastfeeding in public.
Well, I would just say as a person who is not a mom, there's no part of me that's offended if a boob is being whipped out anywhere to feed a baby or otherwise, really. Whip them out.
Whip them out. I'm not going to do that here because I have on a dress.
Yeah. That would be whipping everything out.
Yeah. So I got to do that. We started out exclusively breastfeeding, and then her weight dipped, and that was when like, okay, well, if she doesn't like start gaining weight like she should, then you might have to consider alternatives, read pumping. And like, I just nearly broke out in hives. Like I literally was sobbing hysterically in the doctor's office, and Mark was there with me. And like, I can't go back to pumping. I cannot go back to pumping because it was so defeating of an experience. So, okay, so you need to like, let's adjust and like, let's feed this baby a little more frequently, which is hard too. Like now I've got to feed the baby every 2 hours. I've got 2 other little kids. I mean, it's not easy, But there's some stuff that is easy. Like, yes, it's portable and I don't have to wash pump parts and prep bottles. Like that was, in some ways it's a time saver, in some ways not. Like,
Yeah.
So I started to pay attention to the narrative of self-talk that would go on in my head. And I remember that, like, this jarring instance in particular where we'd just gotten back from this doctor's appointment. They were like, okay, you need to start feeding her more. I had been using this Haka breast pump, which is this silicone, it almost looks like a flower vase with like that you just kind of like with a suction cup that you squeeze onto your boob and it kind of pulls milk out. Well, I would feed her on one side and then I would do the Haka on the other, not realizing that I was pulling like milk out that she needed because I was so excited to see like how much that thing filled up. Mm-hmm. And like look at it and be like, oh my God, this is way more out of one side than I could ever get double pumping. Woo! Look at me. Look at me go. This is like grade A for Emily. And so I changed that. She had gotten a little bit of a cold, so that can affect eating. And then my husband went through really a stressful time with his business that he owned with two other partners and exiting and getting out of that business. And it wasn't handled well on his partner's side. And that was a very stressful time for our family. And here I am with this newborn baby. So all these factors like probably played into the weight gain dip. But I remember I overslept because I would set alarms on my phone. If you look at my phone right now, you can see like basically there's an alarm for like every 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So like I could like, wake up and feed all of my babies or pump or whatever. Yeah. And I overslept. I turned off my alarm and instead of 2 hours passing, it had been 4 hours. Well, the baby is asleep peacefully next to me. And I just remember this is what I said to myself in my head. You are a piece of shit. How dare you? Like, you missed feeding the baby. Like, how are you going to do this if you can't even get up and feed the baby? And then I just stopped and I thought, why am I talking to myself this way? I would never talk to someone this way. Even if I didn't like them, I wouldn't talk to somebody this way. So why am I talking to myself this way? So I was like, this is part of what has to change. Like, this is what has to change. Yeah. So I started this journal process and I just started writing down once a day, every day, something that I could go back to multiple times throughout the day because you're feeding the baby. That's pretty much, you're a feed sack. Something nice to say to myself, something that I'm grateful for, and what I call a lactation visualization. So what's something going to help? Like you can feel it. It's a very, like, milk starts to come out of you. It's a very weird, but like awesome, empowering, but also weird feeling when you have what is called like a letdown, like when the baby like gets on and like the milk starts to flow in. So I'm like, what is something that can help that milk flow in? Like when you have to pee and you hear water and you're like, oh my God, now I have to really pee. Yeah. Like I wanted something that would help trigger like the milk flow. So I would think of things like warm coffee or a nice hot shower or sitting in a warm bath or feeling the sun on my skin or listening to the rain fall outside when the window's open. And I would write those 3 things down every day, different every day. Yeah. But then throughout the day, I could go back to them and just like think of them like kind of like a little mantra for the day. And I did this. I still do it. And then I decided to turn that into a journal to help other people in the same kind of boat.
Just so awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because it's hard. I don't like, it's such a lonely experience sometimes. And then really the self-talk, I was just like, gosh, like we all have that inner critic. I know you know it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like I gotta make her be quiet a little bit.
Well, and I think not only all of that, but I mean, I'm not a parent, But from my friends that are parents, what I understand is just like moms can be real mean on the internet and extremely judgmental. So like you're saying that it's very alone. I can imagine that you're struggling, that you can't even feel like, I would guess that you can even like go ask questions, because it seems like you would be met with a lot of judgment instead of like tender understanding.
That is a beautiful phrase, Amanda. Tender understanding. Yes. And even if you don't like put your questions out there, you can go on the internet and you see so much that's so curated to look so perfect and a certain way. It's not helpful, right? Like that, like further reinforces this, like, oh, like it looks so easy for these other people.
Yeah.
Like why is it not working for me? And what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And the internet, like it's a blessing and the curse, because you can find some good resources, but then also there's a lot out there that's really nasty, and it's not helpful when you're up at 3:00 in the morning, like doom scrolling. There's this website called kellymom.com. She's a lactation consultant in Canada. I don't know. I think the site has been around for a long, long time. So it has a lot of like Google rankings. And so it comes up at the top, and it's helpful. I mean, it's well sourced. So it's like legit research and sources, but I would go down a rabbit hole, like trying to justify like why I wasn't producing enough, or what techniques I could try, like to like do anything to get my breast milk supply up when I was trying to nurse Emma and Luke. Like anything. Like there's all kinds of herbal supplements. There's like, I literally had like at one point would like with these very nice cereal bowls that are perfect for this. So I would fill them with warm water, and then I would before pumping, I would lean over them and dip my boobs in these bowls of warm water in the hope that it would like help stimulate more milk production. So here I was, like topless in our bathroom, dipping my boobs in cereal bowls.
Oh man, that there has to be an OnlyFans account dedicated to only that. That has to exist.
It might. I mean, it just might.
If not,
right?
I got another business plan for you.
Right. Okay.
But what I love, at least my takeaway from hearing this too, is obviously using the resource, talking to your doctors, going on the internet and researching. But also what you're saying is a big part of what helped you is going within.
Yes.
It's like listening to you and talking to yourself nicely, and really like listening to yourself seemed to be like a key in addition to those other resources.
Yes. And I think with my opportunity with my third, that was just a way for me to lean even more into my intuition and take what I had learned from my previous experiences and like just trust myself more. Like, no, Emily, like we can do this without having to go back to pumping. So let's try it. And what do we need to do differently? Like cut out the external noise. And like you said, go within and let's figure out how we can do this. And I'm still breastfeeding this kid, and she's 18 months old. So, and we do it twice a day, at morning and before bedtime. And I it's awesome. Like it's been a really good experience. And I think that if I would not have been able to turn within and kind of trust myself more, I don't know if I'd still be doing it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, I think not only like that of going through, what's the name of your journal?
Let It Flow, a journal to guide you on your breastfeeding journey. And you can wonder where the inspo for the title came from. In a house where Frozen 1 or 2 sometimes both are played quite frequently. So, let it go, let it flow.
Yeah.
We'll play on that. And it should be available on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, so like not only like what you've learned for yourself, now you're sharing that knowledge and like having this journal for others, but then just like how you can share this with your kids and like what you've learned and like, it's not necessarily to breastfeeding, of like how you've learned to trust your intuition, speak nicely to yourself. All of those things are going to translate to like, you creating these amazing humans.
Well, I certainly hope so. Sometimes I feel like, oh my God, please don't. I hope I don't F them up too much. But thank you for reminding me. See, like that's something nice I can say to myself. See, I have modeled positive self-talk.
Yeah.
For them, right? And if they can come to it a lot earlier than I did, then awesome. It's about creating this space to trust and lean into myself a little bit more. And the point of the journal, again, it's a journal, so it's open for people to use how they want to use it. And I'm not saying that my way works or is better, because there are so many different ways to do it. But, the idea is to like take this journal and make it your own experience and your own process, because it is your own experience. And just like I learned with all of my kids, each one of my experiences with them was different. So it's really meant for I designed it in a way for people to take it and make it their own. And I don't even care if you use it as a flat surface for your breast pump, if you gotta stabilize that somewhere. So that's the point. It's about owning your experience and looking back and being able to own my journeys with pregnancy and motherhood and what I went through with all three. Well,
and not only that, I don't want to speak for you, but I would say also just like, being grateful for the experience, whether you take it as a positive or negative. I mean, a lot of what you went through is struggle and hard, and how you have, taken the narrative of that as like, what is this teaching me? How can I do this? Like, make this like good for myself, make this good for my kids. And now how can I help others within all of that? So I think it's just also like seeing all of it as part of the journey.
Yes. Thank you. It is. And to own that.
Well, and then what also is cool, I mean, on top of the breastfeeding journal, is what you're doing in I don't even know, I won't even let you go into it. I don't even know how to, but like how you've been inspired by, one of your other kids to like create something that I think is going to put also just so much like amazing light into the world.
Well, thank you. Well, and that's funny that you say that way, Amanda, because my son, Luke, who has Down syndrome, his name means light.
Oh, so, that's awesome.
Yes. So now everybody like makes total sense why George Lucas named Luke Skywalker, because that name means light, right? And that it's a lightsaber and all that stuff. That's for our Star Wars fans out there.
Didn't know that.
Yes.
The more you know.
The more you know. So our son Luke has Down syndrome, and my husband and I have a background in commercial real estate and construction. And Mark has built over $375 million worth of construction projects. I have been in commercial real estate for a good bulk of my career, running a leasing team and then helping raise equity capital. And Mark and I met at a company that built, owned, and operated student housing communities all over the country. He built them, and I ran the sales and leasing team. And what he went through to, divest himself of his previous business, as stressful as that was at the time, it really was, again, a really great blessing, because it refocused our life and really our purpose to solve a big need out there, not only for Luke, our son, because when we think about where will Luke live when he grows up, Luke's going to outlive us. I was born in 1982. The life expectancy for someone with Down syndrome born in 1982 was about 30 years old, maybe. Today it's around 60. So I'm 41. Luke will outlive me, but we want him to have a great quality of life and live to his fullest potential and be able to fulfill all of his dreams. And we just look at ourselves, we're guides of that, but we don't want to leave this earth without making sure that him and the rest of our kiddos are, have opportunities to be set up for success, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, we're here to guide them on that path. So looking around, there are not a lot of options. It's estimated that over 80% of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities or IDD live at home with family members, and over 50% live with a family member that's older than 50. So what ends up happening is that you have, because there are no options for people to live, you end up in a crisis situation. Like someone now has to make a transition to a new living arrangement after a parent or loved one passes away. And, we have come so far, and there are so many incredible advocates and self-advocates and family members and really some game changers out there that have moved things so far as in terms of education and really making sure that the medical community pays attention and treats people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We still have a long way to go. Housing is now a challenge, and we started a real estate company that is going to deliver housing options that meet the needs, desires, and preferences of adults with IDD. So right now it's live at home, or maybe in a group home setting with 3 other people, but that's really it. And that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
You and I have options on where we want to live based on our needs and preferences, right?
Yeah.
That's not available. That's not available for my son when he grows up right now. So we need to do something about it. And that's what we're doing. And we wouldn't have had this opportunity without our son. We wouldn't have had this opportunity if what happened with Mark's business wouldn't have happened, his previous business. And I wouldn't have had the time to even think about publishing a breastfeeding journal, or even exclusively breastfeed. Because I'm an entrepreneur and I was able to do that. And that gets into a whole other thing about how we can support more. How do we support more people? And we've kind of realigned our lives and recommitted ourselves to leverage our professional expertise and personal passion to deliver on something for our fellow American citizens that, deserve the dignity of choice on where to live. And if you think about something like curb cuts in the sidewalks that were initially designed for people who use wheelchairs, well, they help more than just people who use wheelchairs. I've got a huge double jogging stroller. It's very nice to have that curb cut when you're dealing with 50 pounds of kids and 40 pounds of dog, right? Like, and like delivery drivers and bikers and little kids on skateboards and those electric scooters. It's just like that benefited everybody. And we believe that if we can help solve this housing need, really it's crisis, it's going to make all of us better, because it's going to help. It's not just helping people with IDD. It's helping their loved ones and their caregivers and their support teams. And it has a major ripple effect, and ultimately people in the community, because our lives are so much richer. Life is hard. I think one of the things that I have learned is life is hard, but it is also very beautiful in its complexity. And we have met the most incredible people on this journey that we wouldn't have met without Luke.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It gives me chills. Like, it just, and I know you and I talk a lot about being authentic and authentic conversations and authentic relationships and being yourself, and the friendships and relationships that we have established because of Luke, you can just cut through all of the fake crap and right to the heart. And there are people that understand and walk. They might be walking, a slightly different journey, but they're there to hold your hand when you walk yours. Like they'll pop over on your path and you pop over on theirs. And it's pretty awesome. And a big thank you to all of the people that have supported us. And like we would have like 3 podcast episodes if I went into all those people, including you. I mean, we were working together when I found out I was pregnant with Grace, and Luke was hospitalized a lot. And I'm just so grateful that I've been able to surround myself with compassionate, understanding people.
Yeah, I mean, well, same. And just like, listening to you, even though I know this is all the stuff that you've been doing. And like, we just caught up for the first time. We went on a hike with me out at the nature center a couple weeks ago, and we hadn't seen each other in a year. And a lot has happened for both of us in the past year.
Yes, a lot has happened.
So it's like, I already heard all this, but hearing you saying it again, it's just like, oh my God, like how lucky am I to know such like amazing people that are, just like, I can't even express it. Just talking about like how beautiful life is and like the connections that you have. And just when you see people that, choose to live life, to like be in service and help other people and like have just like an understanding of like life is hard and I get it. And like, I'm not bitter about it. I'm not mad about it. I'm not going to lash out. I'm not saying that you don't have your moments, because come on, we all do.
We're all human. That's part of being human. Right?
Yeah. But like, ultimately you're taking these things of like, okay, and now how can I do this to help community? And how can I build this? And how can I build solutions on my time here on earth? Like, how do I leave my mark, and how do I leave my impact, and like what I have learned, and how do I like spread that? I just think is so incredible. And a lot of people don't do that. And, when you find people that find, passion and purpose and deeply care about other humans, or even animals or anything, any sort of like living thing. And like, it's how can I let my life be, I'm alive, and how do I use that to be of service to these things? I just think is so amazing. And things like that don't get done without intention, drive, hard work, grit, tears, all of that stuff. So it's not like, oh, I have this amazing idea and it's easy breezy and it's going to happen. Like, not only do you have to go through a grind to get to the point, I think, where you come to these realizations, where you want to help other people. But then when you start the process, like the pain doesn't end there. But you're like, how does this teach me? How does this serve me? And this is too important not to do. And I think that, you're just bringing up authenticity I think that just in our modern culture and social media, like everything makes it looks like everybody else has it so easy. And it's in this really beautiful 30-second video or these photos of like, even just like, for me and my end and the things that I've talked about a million times, like weight loss journeys. Like, yeah, I got to watch your weight loss journey in a 30-second video. Like, I obviously know you put in a lot of work, but how much do we really absorb that mentally of like, there were days where you laid on the floor and cried. I know it. And there was more than one day of doing through this process of, trying to feel good and be healthy and do it. Like, there's still so much pain that goes into these things. And I feel like we all kind of, I think, innately as humans want to skip past the pain, and we don't want to be in pain, obviously. So I think that it's easy to consume other people's stories or see it in these flashy like social media posts and like be like, oh, we get to skip past that part, or we only get to see it for 2 seconds. And so whenever we try to do these things for ourselves and we feel those feelings and we feel the pain, it's easy, I think, to bounce on it or just not keep pushing through because you're like, oh, this feels much yuckier than I thought it was going to be from seeing somebody else's like 1 minute long success video. And I think that's why I think it's becoming even harder for people to do some of these things, because not only is life just the obstacle, and there's so many obstacles around us, but then we have these mental obstacles of the impression that everybody else is doing it in a snap of a finger. And then whenever we can't get it that way, then we tell ourselves that we're terrible. And of course we can't do it. And then we've given ourselves another huge roadblock from doing this like really amazing thing that can help so many people. So I guess all of that ramble to say of just like, you know, you're doing this whole process and you're still like moving through it, even though this process isn't easy in any sort of way of still just moving through it because it's too important not to, I think is just also, I just think that, you know, for yourself and anybody that does those sorts of things, it's amazing because it's real easy to just be like, I don't feel like doing this.
Well, and you're right. Like, trust me, like there are, it's not all perfect. It's not all glamorous. But you hit on something really important that I think it bears repeating. We see the 30-second synopsis of what could have been a 3, 4, 10-year journey.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like when you operate on lizard brain, which is what social media is like hits our very basic lizard brain. Like,
dopamine hits.
That dopamine hit, like, oh yeah, that feels really good. And like, it just makes things a lot more challenging. I think there's a double-edged sword of it. Like, yeah, like you can be inspired by somebody else's journey and be shown like, you know, there are ways that this can happen and be done. And I can see this in other people. And I think that's really cool. But those tools were not engineered for that purpose, right? Like they were engineered to, they're giant slot machines.
Yeah.
They are giant slot machines. So I think that's really important for all of us to take a minute to remember that we're seeing the best of the best of the best. And I get enraged by beige because all of them, like all the moms, like everyone's in like these like cream and beige colored clothes and their house is cream and beige. I'm like, what? You have toddlers. Like what? I do not know what lengths you're going through to keep everything looking that way, but I'm not committed to doing that. Like, sorry, like I got other stuff to do. Like I like in this, but I have to remind myself like there's no way it can look like that all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The other thing I think in that beautiful monologue was we're all capable of stuff. We're all capable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every single one of us.
And we all have different circumstances. So there's going to be different, again, everybody's journey is different.
Yes.
So, but, you know, I think that, you know, we all have choices. And I mean, that can lead you in all sorts of different directions. So I can't say like, oh, everybody that wants to have a private jet will own one. Like if I just like, I mean, I guess you could. I mean, I don't know. So I think that's hard because I don't want to get into this whole conversation because this is a whole nother thing. But you talk about like people's circumstances and, how privileged people are, how you grow up, or like where you, like there's, I mean, everything, we all have struggles. And there's different, it's all just like, again, like how you perceive them, like how do you learn from them? And then also like, what are your goals and what is a realistic goal for you in circumstances? And I don't know. I just think that, again, not to just totally bag on social media, but I think that because can be so amazing. But it's not amazing whenever you bag on yourself because of it. That, that if you, like, if I thought like all of a sudden, like I am going to be a Playboy bunny, in my like weight loss journey or something of like, oh, is that the healthiest thing for me? Is that what I want to strive for? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, is that a goal that's realistic to like who I am as a person, what I'm doing? So it's like, it's also like, I think that just really, again, talking about like knowing yourself instead of seeing like a video, like this woman went from this to a Playboy bunny. Is that really what I want? Or am I like, you know, am I making sense?
I think between dipping boobs in bowls of water and you being a Playboy bunny, we might be onto something here. I mean, I don't know. Like,
sorry, I'm just a little worked up over here. Apparently.
No, but you have a great point. Like, I think it's about coming within yourself, discovering what those things are. And
well, and not to interrupt you, but like, I guess a better point than the Playboy bunny thing is if you're watching these videos and you're seeing this mom of toddlers in her all white house, and it is a choice on you whether you are like, is that what I really want for myself? Or is that what's great for her? Like, how am I modeling my goals? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's just like you're seeing these things, and instead of being like, I suck because I must be a terrible mom because I can't keep my house all white whenever I have toddlers at home, or like, is that really your goal? Do you want to have an all white, pristine house as a mom of toddlers? Like, instead of making yourself feel bad about how this woman is living her life or living her life on social media, like, I think it's internally being like, is that what I really want for myself? Like you just said, no, I don't. I don't want. So it's like, I think instead of seeing those things and just before you swipe to the next video, you trash on yourself for it, or it makes you feel some sort of feelings, or you feel like, is that what I should strive for? That's what other moms are doing. So that should that be the goal? Then be like, really listen to yourself and be like, is it? Maybe it is for you, but maybe it's not. So I think that there's, again, like the part with like comparing lives and all of that stuff is the pausing and being like, is that what I really want for me? Is that authentic for me? Or do I feel like that's what everyone else is doing and that's what's good and that's what I should do too?
I think that's so important that we need to constantly reteach ourselves.
Yeah, because it's hard.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard. It's very hard to look at that stuff. And I think also like I try and pay attention to like, okay, what are these feelings telling me? Like what, like I feel icky about something, or I feel yucky about, like, what is that telling me? And you were talking about, you know, we are hardwired as humans. Like pain is bad. Like pain is bad, right? Like, but what is that pain telling you? Like, what is that pain telling you? I think about like looking back on some of the points in my life, like when I went into labor at 29 weeks and 2 days, something was wrong, and there was pain, and I needed to figure it. Like that was telling me something, and I'm so glad that I listened to that. Right, like so. Just looking back on my journey and navigating that, and as a mom of a kiddo with Down syndrome and that has a medical complexity, we come up against the school system and the medical complex, but like, okay, making sure that we're following Luke's, just like with the breastfeeding thing too, like we're following Luke's lead and like what is best for him and like what's important for him, and making sure that I advocate and lean into that for him. Like, and that is something, like just circling back to intuition again, like that is something that's also really helped me hone my intuition and understand, like when we're hospitalized and they want to come in and draw blood at 4:00 in the morning, no, like it's okay to like, I can say no to the medical professionals now. I can. And I like, right. Like, no, like my son is part of what will help him get better is sleeping, and he's sleeping at 4:00 in the morning. You're not coming in to draw blood because it's not an easy process on a toddler. We're not doing it. No, come back when he's awake.
Yeah. And I will say that to you too. I know when we were working together, you were in and out of the hospital a lot. Mm-hmm. So I think that's so important to have those tools. And again, like knowing yourself and knowing your family to be like, listen, I know you know what you're doing, but I also have to like be an advocate for me and everyone else through that part, which is hard because it's not like they want to be told no.
Well, I think there's a way, like, I think when Emma was born, and like I said earlier, we had to hand a lot over. There was so much at that point that was out of our control. I made a commitment that everyone in this hospital, whether they are sweeping the floors, emptying the trash, to the executive, plays a role in my child's care. And I am grateful to them for that. And I will be kind and respectful every time I set forth in this hospital. Like I will, and I did, like I made sure I get to know our nurses, and I get to like everybody, and treat them, and even though I'm going through a really hard time, try and treat them with dignity and respect, and be gracious, because it makes, when I stand up and say, you're not sticking my kid at 4:00 in the morning. Also, I'm 32 weeks pregnant, and so no, right? Like, like I don't say it that way, but like they listen. And we were there in May of last year with Luke. He got some kind of stomach bug, and every time he gets some kind of stomach bug, because he doesn't absorb water and nutrients through his colon, that's like the last stop. Our colorectal team calls it your poop oven. I was learning a little bit something about boobs and poop today, which for your listeners that are moms out there, they're like, yeah, we deal in poop and boobs all the time. That's our currency.
Now we're back to OnlyFans.
Right? Now we're back to OnlyFans. Like, whoa, boy. Okay. He doesn't have that because he's like his colon, he doesn't use his colon right now. So he doesn't get that same level of sodium absorption and potassium absorption. So when he gets some kind of stomach bug, we have to go get IV support. And we could be there for 3 nights. We could be there for 7 nights. And we were there, and Mark, because we kind of tag team, and it's disruptive to our lives, but luckily, you know, we work together and we have our own business and we can navigate this. And shout out to employers out there that make this easy for families that go through this stuff. The nurses came in, and Mark said something like they wanted to draw blood. And Mark said, you know, this is the way that Luke does best when we draw blood. We need the vascular access team, blah, blah, blah. And the nurse said to the other nurse, like, this family really knows what they're doing, and we are told to listen to them. And that made me feel really good. Like, like, right. Like we respect them and they respect us, but at the same time, we know our kiddo.
Yeah.
And everybody's goal is to get him better. So let's figure out how we do that.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine the concept that you respect other people and then they respect you back. You know what I'm saying? It's just like it's so simple, but how many people don't follow that? And
right. And it's easy. It's especially when you're in a stressful situation and things get hard. It is hard to do. I get it. But that is something that I've always kind of made a commitment to do. And I've just found that has gone a lot easier. Now, we haven't gotten into like really heavy stuff with IEPs at school and stuff. So, you know, that's going to be interesting. But, you know, I hope to be able to adopt that same mindset. And again, like trust intuition, like advocate for yourself, for your kids, for yourself. And just also start with being nice to yourself.
Yeah.
Start with being nice to yourself.
Isn't it crazy how hard that is?
It's so hard.
It's like, so that's hard. So sad that it's so hard for us to be nice to ourselves.
Right? Like, why? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I think, again, is it evolutionary? Is it, I don't know. But I think that, again, going back to the journal, like that was the cornerstone of why I started it, because I need to figure out a way to be nicer to myself.
Yeah. So if somebody just goes on Amazon, do they need to look up the entire title of the journal?
I think if they type in Let It Flow and then Emily Kendall, or you can also, I'm going to link it on my website. My website is emilykendall.com, and it will be available. It will take you right to Amazon from my website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I feel like we could talk forever.
I know we could.
And again, like you're doing like so many amazing things.
Well,
and so
you.
like I wanted to make sure that we got to talk about like all the big things you have going on right now. And I appreciate you so much. I'm so glad that like you're in my life. And I think that, yeah, you're making some really big, impactful movements for multiple kinds of people. And I think that's just like so huge and amazing. So thank you for all that you do.
Well, I have a person in my life that does that herself. So, right? Like when you have people that model that like you,
oh, thank you.
I feel the same way. Ditto.
Awesome. Well, thanks for stopping by, and thank you for petting my dog for an hour.
He's been very good. He's just been here on my lap.
He has. Like, I was really worried about the barking, and he finally chilled out. So now that we're done recording, I'm sure he'll be back to jumping. Thank you, Emily.
You're welcome. Thank you, Amanda.
AmandaValentineBites.com